Yay! Camera rolling.
Action.
Okay, starting. Yes, guys, very nice to be here. Hello, my name is Louigi Verona. I'm a musician who is known probably a little bit as an author of Project Growing, which is an ambient music project, has a lot of tunes. I think it's what, 257 right now. It's got a lot of tunes. Like lifelong project. But basically, I got involved with Linux in about 2009, and since then I was a person who tried to do something with Linux. So I just want a quick raise of hands. I heard people saying something like Linux, MediaRT, something like that. So who of you identify as, first of all, musicians? Like people who, okay. And the rest of you, I assume, identify more like developers or technology people, right? Okay, so we have a good like 50-50. Okay, that's good, that's good. This is gonna be exciting. So today I want to talk actually about two things. The major thing will be, the first thing part of the talk will be about electronic music in general and about experimentation and what electronic music is, in my view. And the second part will be trashing Linux, but in a very good and constructive way. So basically, for people who might be, for example, later on watching, or those of you who are not very experienced with Linux, I'm going to tell you what you should expect and why from Linux if you're a musician. And maybe even if you're a developer, because I've been analyzing a lot of what's going on, so I'll give you my view. Hopefully it's going to be useful and even maybe debatable. Last time I tried to debate this on Linux audio mailing lists, it was so-so. Some people reacted aggressively, some people ignored it, but generally there were people who wrote to me in person and said, yes. So okay, so we'll start actually with this. So actually when I was preparing for this talk, I imagined basically the club very much like this, but I imagined that there would be no couches, there would be basically chairs. So the analogy that I want to give here is concerning chairs. But anyway, so basically every one of you use these things, right? So you know what they're for, right? So many people wrongly assume that these things are only for sitting. That is incorrect. In reality, chairs can be used for many things. During the times of drama, revolution, war, somebody banging on your door, chair is a lock. It's a very good lock for some of the doors. You can actually put it onto the door handle and nobody will be able to open the door for a long time. Especially if these are made of iron or hard plastic like this, you can't break these things. So, and that's basically the foundation of electronic music. Taking something that was meant to be used as something else and then using it the way you want it to. And that's like something that has been recognized by many people, but I will lead you through some of this history of electronic music to show you that basically that's how electronic music got born into modern life. So now the track. I don't know, people listen to different kind of music. This is put on not for you to say, wow, this is great music, but to recognize something. So when you hear music like this, you immediately identify, okay, so it's probably being played in a player or something. Now I'm telling you, actually this is being generated live. Not a single person in the world has listened to this exact tune because it is kind of different each time. Now you're thinking, how did he do it? Maybe he has a sequencer or something. But I haven't even started Jack, and all of you know what Jack is, right? So I haven't even started. So I've actually used something that was never supposed to be used the way I used it. So what I have here, in order to run this tune, is I have a player called Cologne. You know this player. So Cologne is a player that allows you to play gapless tracks. So what I did was, in one player, I have a playlist playing like this. So it's playing all the time the same sequence. And that sequence are just loops, like perfectly recorded loops. And this is what you're hearing. So the other part is you're hearing different lead instruments, like also loops, but which have randomizer, and so they're being played each time in you. And then finally you have a player that has vocal samples that give the samples directly. So guys that wrote this never meant for me to do this. But that's an idea that you can use. In fact, you can use various shortcuts to start adding different loops and then change this, and there you go, it's almost a DJ thing. The only thing that prevented me from actually using this as actual decks, and I tried doing this, was that it's impossible to synchronize this automatically. The only thing you can do is synchronize it by hand, if you try to go to the terminal and just launch them at the same time, it doesn't really work that way, unfortunately. So life sucks at the end. But sometimes you have small wins like this. So this is an example of how you can come up with something that was not really supposed to be used that way. So now I'm stopping this. Actually, you can't stop this like this. You have to do it this way. So that's one of the examples. But that's something that is the main thing for me on Linux, is the ability to experiment, take the software that is generally very multifunctional, and we'll talk later about why that is on Linux, and then use it for something else. But I was not the first one, of course. Who am I? So there are people who have done a lot of this, and a lot of the breaks in the electronic music happened through experimentation. And I guess many of you know the composer named Steve Reich. And in 1965, he wrote a monumental, I guess, by electronic music standards, composition called It's Gonna Rain. And that was a composition where he used just the vocal sample, and he used 2 tape reels. And he wanted to do this. He wanted to start one sample and then start the other like 50% offset. And this is what he wanted to do, and he just wanted to record that. But what happened is, of course, we have real life and physics and that kind of stuff, and so the reels are not perfect, and they started slowly going out of phase. And he was like, wait a minute, that's interesting. And so what he did later on was, in 1966, he made another piece which is called Come Out, where he actually started vocal sample which was identically synchronized, and then slowly began to go out of phase. And the composition was exploring all the phases that you can go through. And that is called phasing since then. He also wrote us a very short piece you can find online in 2002, where he was speaking about this concept of process music. And so I think he was also the one who coined that term. So in other words, you start a process that basically defines what's going on in the piece. You're not composing it anymore. You're just setting up. One of the things that he did was, for example, he would have 2 speakers, and he would have a microphone and a cord here and there. Then he would swing them like this, and each time they passed through the speaker, they would say boom, 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 and then they would start going out of phase 2, and then you would get this weird recording, and then when you listen to this, you're like, wow, what's going on? And so that's, to me, an example of how a person would take a tape reel and then use it for something kind of weird, and then say, yeah, actually, this is music. And many people consider this to be a huge, huge inspiration. Brian Eno famously said that if it was not It's Gonna Rain, he would never be into music like this, because that's when he thought, wait a minute, composing can be actually intellectual as well. And of course, I mean, composing was intellectual before that. I mean, Bach is a great example of intellectual composing, as many people believe. It's a great, actually, mix of intellect and emotion. So, anyway, so that's one of the examples of this. I want to show you a droning piece that I made exploring this concept. Actually, today, later on, I'll show you part of my workflow. I use phasing a lot. Phasing is good because it allows you to create actually massive, randomly sounding textures. We humans are extremely bad at randomizing things, like very bad. One of the examples that you usually give is, you ask a person, can you give me a random sequence of digits? And people will say, 1, 7, 5, 3, 9, 4. And they're sort of actually picking them so that they would be like sort of random, right? That's what we would say. In reality, you can say 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Yeah, that's an absolutely random sequence of digits, but we're not wired like that. So I'll show you so he has, actually, so I find it difficult to listen to Reich's early pieces. You can see that it was like a breakthrough, like, wow, this is a simple but very powerful idea, because you would have these overtones that you would never even think about, but once you start listening to it, at a certain point in time, when this goes out of phase, you start hearing sounds that you've never thought you would hear. These are just vocal samples. What are you talking about? But this, he would have in in the left channel, he would have the sample in the other channel, and so when it would go out of phase, it's going to create kind of weird vibes. So I'll show you something that I did a while ago, and that's droning 239. It's sort of explored the same concept. So, okay, let's see. Do I hear something? I don't hear something. Let's see. Yep. So let me just switch this to another these are two loops. The idea is the same. Very simple. The thing is about this phasing concept is that kind of each time you hear somebody's experiment, you're like, okay, I got it. That's it. There's nothing else to do here. But once you start playing yourself, you find out that if you can use different loops, you can get absolutely different results. So that is a typical example of phasing.
I remember there was a pretty cool moment here. So, for example,
I'm like forwarding. Then you get a pretty cool thing going. And then see how it begins to break apart, actually pretty quickly. And then I'll tell you something about your brain that you maybe never knew. So, looks like as if it's just, you're just playing this along. Actually, it's not playing this anymore, but you're not hearing it yet. So at some point in time, you will start feeling this breaking down. Then now you see this like jazzy feel. Right, so. And then it begins to fall apart, and you're sort of still clinging to that pattern, but now it's falling apart, it's going to something else. And that composition lasts for 49 minutes without ever actually repeating any combinations. So it's like one loop, another loop, and it has a very small difference in length. And they're very short. And so I made sure that when I returned to the basic point, that's when I stopped. So you see, it broke down already. Now, the thing about the brain is that our brain has a lot of machinery. So something that we typically like. I don't know, if you do this right now, for example, you will see that the room is not like doing like this. But if you do like this with a camera, it will like go crazy. And so our brain has a huge amount of stabilizers. And so we have, whenever you're here, let's say that you're standing apart from somebody and they're doing this, and you realize that, I mean, it takes time for the sound to arrive to our ears, and light is much faster, so there should be like, they should not be synchronous, right? They should be different. But they're not. The brain is like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, just trust me. But in reality, there is a pretty set, I think it was something like 8 milliseconds or something like that. I forget the number. I remember the number 8 for some reason. Anyway, so there's a certain set of milliseconds after which your brain says, nah, they're not synchronous anymore. And so it's when you're listening to phasing, you can sometimes get the result. You're like, yeah, whoa, and then suddenly it goes out of phase. Or it goes into the phase of some pattern pretty like immediately. It's kind of cool to see. So, yeah, so that's passive music. So another cool story about electronic music, something you probably know, but I'll go with it anyway. So 1982, a company that probably you'll know releases a product which is called transistor bass. And that product was supposed to be used as an accompaniment for guitar players when they're practicing alone. They would be able to have some bass player sort of thing. But later, it never caught on. They just released several thousand units from 1982 to 1984. That was the production of this unit, and then it stopped. And like, yeah, whatever. It was not a successful product. In 1986, the product, which actually is TB303 transistor bass, became to be widely used in electronic music as they started actually experimenting with it. It was not supposed to be used this way, of course. But now that you look back on it, like think about it, they make a product that they believe you just has to be a boring practicing unit. Then somebody starts actually using all of this. And when you think about TB303 today, it's like a standalone instrument. You can even think it's like, it's like with evolution. Like, yes, somebody had to design this. You can even construct a conspiracy theory that, yeah, in reality they knew what they were doing. They were testing how dumb the humanity is. And it took us, 8 years to come up with house music. So I don't know if you know, but Linux has actually a great TB303 plugin called NecoB. Do you know this? Yeah? Many people know this, but rarely I hear people actually using it. So
I will start doing soon.
Yes, I'll show you how it sounds. So I actually written an album dedicated totally to NecoB because I was so obsessed. Like, oh wow, I did phasing, now I have to do TB303. So I'll show you like several samples right now. The only problem with it is that it's like many things in Linux. You write something that is very, very small, and then you have to combine it with something else so that it's like a decent thing. So that's the NecoB doesn't have some of the elements. I think it doesn't have distortion, but it has like most of it. Some things are different. Like it's not a complete clone. So I'll show you a little bit how it sounds.
Okay, so this is like a standard trance mode where you have the distortion. Distortion is made by a plugin other than Necobeat, and then that is going up with so the cutoff frequency is down and the envelope is up all the way, and so then you experiment with this. You probably heard a lot of this trance music kind of stuff. But I mean, I was fascinated. Like, yeah, Linux can do this. Actually, can do this. It's like it's not. So yeah, see it. It can sound differently. That's also Necobeat. Boom, boom, boom. That's so, and you can. That's also Necobeat. See, so it can do a lot of things. That's I guess one of the reasons why people are fascinated with this is that it's really a very cool instrument. It happened randomly. Nobody designed it. There you go. So yeah, I guess I mean that's also TB303. So maybe you can check it out later. The album's called Another Reality. It's out there. Yeah, that's this one. There we go. There it is again. So that album was made with Q Tractor, Rack, Necobeat, that kind of stuff. So it's like all modular, and believe me, that was tough. Like making such music in a modular environment is like death. So I lived through this. So now you're looking at a Linux Ghost. Resurrected Linux Ghost. Yeah. So that was tough. Okay, so yeah, so that's also what's electronic music for me. Like taking something that is really, I mean, sometimes I think that people that design Necobeat were like, yeah, nobody's gonna ever use it. No. So
Necobeat or 303?
It's called Necobeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the Necobeat people thought nobody will use it.
I'm sort of joking. I mean, I'm saying this because almost nobody uses it. Everybody's like, yeah, Linux has a TB303 clone. There it is. Okay, can you show me a tune that was written with it? No.
How long has it been around, Necobeat?
10 years at least. I think it's very old.
Because
it was part of Juice, Suite.
Apart from Necobeat and a few others, there haven't been many good Linux synths at all. So
Yeah,
I think people just dismissed the idea of good synths on Linux as
yeah, you know, one part of the mystery of TB303 is that unless you actually take the time to tweak it, you don't believe that it can make any good sounds. I mean Roland, who made this, obviously were not stupid. They just never, I guess, thought that you can actually turn the envelope to the maximum and then start playing something and turn the cutoff at the same time. Like, what are you, stupid or something?
Interesting thing is that actually two people came up with that concept independently. There was this Indian,
the Indian guy. Then we had the Chicago house. Then, no, we had also Wikipedia says it all. Yeah. I mean, nobody, of course, came just one. I mean, the Future guy is probably the one that came with this. Those guys were like simpler. They were just using it as it is, which actually, see, that's not it. When he started doing this thing, that's when TB303 got born, like in electronic music. So anyway, so that's part. And of course, you guys probably know about circuit bending. It's kind of weird thing. I find it interesting in a geeky kind of way. I hope you can relate to this. So some things you find geeky, but you don't know what to do with them. So I kind of find the circuit bending community, I get them. I understand what they're doing. It's fascinating, but I'm not sure that this has a lot of practical value in that I never heard anybody say, okay, here's an album that I released for my circuit bending. Maybe it's there, I don't know, maybe it's there. But I've seen several documentaries. I sometimes go to YouTube, like routinely, if I want to watch something, I just circuit bending, whatever, and just see what people do. It's kind of fun, where they take the synthesizers, it could be even a child synthesizer, and their idea is to change the circuit so that it would give weird, unique sounds. Most of them sound bizarre. It's very difficult to use them, but you can try. But I guess that people are fascinated by the fact that they're just breaking things and making them work in a different way. Basically, that's what Linux people do in general, so we can all relate to that, right? So we took Linux, which was not supposed to be a user-friendly thing, and we made Ubuntu. Like, wow. Right? So there you go. Electronic music and Linux are very clear things, very, very similar. Okay, so now I'm sort of gonna move to sound music, and this is something that I had a talk at LAC 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago when I talked about the concept of sound music. So this is something that I guess many people sort of know, Not many people actually talk about it, but I do hear a lot of arguments, surprisingly very ideologically based, that this kind of music sucks generally. So I'll put something on so that we'll see what I'm talking about. And okay, so I'll show at the same time you'll see another example of phasing. Actually, this is phasing as well. Let me show you. So, okay, so this is phasing as well. So the choir sounds are actually phased, so they're maybe 4 loops at the same time. So you hear this as random layers of sound. In reality, they're sort of determined because there are just loops with that length that start phasing. So you have all these combinations. Of course, most of these would be like 3 minutes long. So in order to phase them completely, it's going to be hours and hours of music. So you know that what you're listening right now to is like kind of unique every minute. And each time there's going to loop again, it's going to be slightly unique as well. And that gives a good feeling of random because it's very difficult. If you just take a standard like DAW and you just want to randomize things, it's very complicated. As I said, it's like our brain doesn't know how to do that. We start falling into patterns immediately. Try that. It's kind of weird.
Nice idea. Good idea.
Yeah. So it's something that is used by many ambient artists. C. Roche does that all the time.
You're
So,
not angry when I would do this to your idea?
No.
Cool.
I'm happy.
I will try
In fact, it's not my idea.
It's a nice idea
Remember.
to make ambient music, really. I like it.
Yeah. It's not a secret among ambient musicians.
It's
So.
new to me.
Yes, it was new to me as well. At some point in time, I was like banging my head. I want to do that kind of music. When I heard first this 2006 something, I was like, okay, finally I found something that I really want to do. How do I do this? And I started doing this randomized thing, and then it took time. Another thing that you can, electronic music is based a lot on tools. So that's what we're talking about, right? So we're using tools, and they really shape the way our music is. And so one of the things that I was also fascinated by is modern, minimal house scene. You know, Richie Houghton, those kind of guys. If you know these, Germany has a lot of DJ stuff. But it's actually very interesting from a music point of view because, first of all, a lot of this is compositionally interesting. That they have to make it move somehow out of very limited material very often. And then you would hear wow, such a great tune. How would I go about composing it? And I would start with a sequencer. I would start placing notes and trying to get some groovy sounds. And it never worked, and I never could figure out why. But then as you try the tools they're using, then you're getting, oh, I was doing this the wrong way. In reality, what you have to do, take already written tunes, then make small loops, like 2-beat loop here, 2-beat loop there, 2-beat loop here, and then those 3 decks would mix in ways that you would never make up yourself. It will sound like an actual melody, but it's actually made up of many, many different stuff. And so, if you know how to do things, then you get them down and you realize it's not really about being super genius and knowing how to compose. It's about the technique. It's about knowing how to do it exactly. So that's the same thing. Once you know, oh, okay, this is how I do it, you don't have to make up this weird stuff. And there are many things you can experiment there. So, so I'm putting another composition, and I'm beginning to talk to you about sound music, and that's something that I've been struggling with when I just started doing this because. Whenever you start doing something creative, you want to show it around. Whenever you show it around, people comment on it. And especially if they're people like your friends, family, they will comment on it in a very cruel manner, right? They will say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to yourself? Right, so, and you have to, you start thinking, okay, indeed. So the first thing that you can, whenever you're listening to music like this, your first thing that people will tell you is yeah, but there's no melody here. What is this? This is even more melodic than usual, but there's no theme there. So how is this music? Maybe this is background, you can put it in an elevator or something like that. Elevator music, that's how they call it, right? But is it really elevator music? And so my argument is that it's not, and that in order to answer this question, we have to take 2 paths. One of them is to change the definition of music and expand it and say, okay, music is also this. Or we have to say, actually, this is a different form of art. And I'm actually in favor of the second option. Because I believe that whenever you're listening to music such as ambient music, sound music, something that is not based on notes, then actually it feels, science can maybe later on give us experiments and studies that show that this is true, but I do feel as subjective experienced that it sort of asks you to activate different parts of your brain. You sort of think differently when you're listening to a melody which has like a theme that you can say. That's one part of your brain, and when you're listening to this, it's sort of, whoa, that's totally something different. So let's go around like some basics. So most of the music that we know, classical music or the sheet music that we have, is usually like you hear this and it's like abstract music, right? Abstract music. In reality, that is not abstract at all. That is like the concrete music. That is abstract music because it's abstract in terms that you can write it on a piece of paper. It's like mathematics. It doesn't matter, like, or let's say that I would be very careful here. I would say that it does not matter that much what you play it with. What matters are the combinations of notes themselves, the combinations of pitches. When you're listening to Bach, you can appreciate it even if you're listening it on a bad MIDI file. But what's important is that you're listening what Bach came up with sort of mathematically, in a very abstract sense. If you're talking about a recording, when you're recording a street, you can't put that down on paper. That is actual sound material. And so I'm arguing that there are two different aspects to music. You can have it as combinations of notes, or you can have it as concrete sounds that you're working with as material. So that would be much more similar to musical sculpture, where you're taking sound and you're doing something with it, and your material are not notes and combinations of mathematical things, but actual sound, and which is malleable at this point. And so this is a very different concept. It's very difficult to mix those. I'm usually very careful to say that I've never, that I think that it's usually a bad idea. What I really think is that it's always a bad idea. I have not heard even one example when that worked. So each time that let's say that you're listening to this, and then suddenly I take out a flute or piano, and then I start playing the actual leads over this, like when Gellis does, for example. That's it. Then that's a totally different thing, because that now is scratched off, and you get the lead. And that is simply the background for the lead.
Can we take a moment just to listen to it?
Yeah.
Maybe you can turn up the volume.
Try to answer these questions. How many tracks, how many lines do you hear? Four, five, six. Any other options?
At least five.
At least five. Okay, yeah. So I mean, so three, basically. You have the arp, you have the horns kind of sounds, and you have the wind. Of course, not like when I was recording the arp, it's actually phasing two loops, and they're phased at 2 points. It's like one is long, the other is very short. So each time you go like this, it's and then again, and so it's kind of and then of course when I'm recording the horns, they initially were several loops phased, but they were all recorded into one track. But the point is that basically these are just, it's just 3 instruments. It's kind of minimalistic. Droning project in general is very minimalistic. There was several times already, and in fact one was in September and August, where I would create a track and it would have like 7 lines, like 7 tracks of different instruments, and I would think, nah, I'll take this one out, I'll take this one out, I'll take this one out, and then when you have 2 or 3 left, okay, now it works. So sometimes you just have to strip it down until the landscape is full enough, and you feel that, okay, anything else will spoil it. So whenever we're talking about like the lead instrument, if I put here a lead instrument, it will change something very significant. Because whenever you put in a lead instrument, you add something that I would call a narrative immediately. So right here, I don't care. I want people to use this, and I don't feel that I need to copyright it. And also, if I want to get money from this, I don't see that copyright stops me or I require it anyway. If people are gonna pay for this, they're gonna pay anyway. I release it as FLAC on Bandcamp, and sometimes people pay and it's okay. And I'm not a professional, like right, I'm an amateur, so I don't need to get money for it. If I would become a professional, then it probably is gonna be at a point where I'm gonna be probably play live at some point. Maybe then the sales will go up themselves anyway. So we'll see. But I mean, I don't care about that much. So that's the part about electronic music, and this is something that I just want for people to think about and to talk more, because I think that kind of music is generally disregarded. And there are, if you read up even on Wikipedia, let's say you go to minimal music on Wikipedia and then read criticism. It really astounds me how ideological it gets. It's like they start saying that this is propaganda, that the repetition of things is like Nazi propaganda. That's actually, people said that. They're like, what are you talking about? This is just music, or this is just other form of art. But so I believe that a lot of this is very traditionalist and very human. People inserting ideology anywhere they want. It's like minimalism, ideology. Guys, what are you talking about? But so that was what I wanted. So now we have a choice, and I want you to make it. So I want to do these things. I want to show you a little bit of my workflow, and so that we together create a phasing ambient thing, and I show you some of the software I'm using. But that would require me to plug this in, right? Or I can talk about Linux and then do the workflow thing. So it's your decision, whatever you want.
I think the workflow would be pretty interesting.
Okay, so let's do this. Do you have to...
Okay, so we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Yes.
And, yeah, 1 minute. Yep.